And we are about to go live in the Facebook group. Okay, I think we are live. So hello everyone, I'm Katie Friedman, founder of Flexible Working People. I'm back again. I was in the group live last night as well, so this is 2 in a row, so that's all very exciting. I am really thrilled tonight to be talking about CVs and to be joined by one of our Flexible Working People CV writers, Kathryn Hall. Hi Kathryn, how are you?
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, not too bad, thank you. And lovely to be invited to take part today. Thank you.
So, no, we're really glad to have you. We've been planning this for ages and we keep meaning to come in and do this and we haven't. So actually, with it being coming up to Christmas and people possibly having a bit of time off to spend some time getting their CV together and maybe thinking about applying for jobs in the new year, new CV, this is actually really good timing. So if you are watching in the Facebook group now, will you just type and say hello or a little thumbs up just to let us know that you can see and hear us? And if you're watching on replay and you do have any questions, feel free to write any questions live or on replay in the comments underneath, and either Kathryn or I will come in and answer them. Kathryn, just so that you know, as a bit of background, is a really experienced CV writer. She's run her own CV writing business for 5 years. She also works as one of our CV writers. She just told me she's been in HR for over 20 years before she set up her CV writing business, and retail management and recruiting before that. I think you just said you've written over 600 people's CVs. So we're in good hands here tonight. Kathryn has a lot of really good experience to share. And I think what's going to be really nice is that Kathryn writes CVs and obviously comes from an HR background. And doing what I do, we do a lot of recruitment and the jobs boards, and I'm looking at CVs every day as well. So I've got, we're going to chat really, and this is going to be a conversation. Kathryn's going to share her experience as a CV writer. And I think also what would be quite useful is for me to share some thoughts on some of the CVs that I see coming in from a recruiter's point of view. And what works and what doesn't work and what makes me pick it up and go, oh, I want to invite them for an interview or not. So lots of tips, lots of hints, lots of strategies. Job market's really tough at the minute. There aren't that many jobs out there. The ones that there are, they're hugely competitive. Some of the more flexible jobs are getting hundreds of CVs for one job. And so your CV is so important for how to make you stand out and get picked. So I think what we'll do is we'll start. I'm going to ask Kathryn to answer this question with just like going right back to basics with what is the purpose of a CV? Because I think we all think that we know, but Kathryn's going to tell us what is the purpose of the CV? Why do we have one, and what's it for, and what do we use it for?
Ultimately, it's around creating that positive first impression for a recruiter. So what you want to do with that CV is you want to get an interview. So don't think about trying to secure the job. That's down the line. That's what the interview is about. But what you want to be doing is trying to get your foot in that door so you can actually go and meet with that recruiter to say, this is me, this is what I'm about. You want to kind of put a document together that really helps to align your skills, your expertise and your value to an organisation all together. So it's very much about having that document that sells your brand, because ultimately it brands you, that you're going out to market to go and sell. And you want to help differentiate yourself from the crowd. Like Katie says, it is a really difficult market out there at the moment with lots of competition. And you want to create that document that makes you stand out.
So let's just talk about that then, because what you've said, I think, people will sort of go, okay, well, I know that I need to, what is brand me? How do I market myself? What needs to be there? How am I going to showcase all my skills and experience? And I think that a lot of people sort of dust off their CV and sort of add jobs. What should the structure of a CV look like? How can people make themselves stand out in a sort of a busy, competitive job market?
I mean, the first big section that you want to put in is around that personal profile. So you really want something, it's effectively your elevator pitch. You want to kind of say, this is me, this is what I've done from my experience before, but this is actually how I can come in and add value to your business. And it then encourages that reader of the CV, who could be really busy and be faced with, 100 CVs to look at, of then going, actually, I want to carry on reading this because it's actually been drawing me in. So then it kind of then goes into sort of the key expertise sections, those little bullet points that you kind of can tick off, saying off the job description. That's where the tailoring comes in, or starts coming in, around that key expertise section, where you can then start going, which are the bits in that job description are they looking for? You then kind of go into that key skills section, where you can start saying, okay, well, actually, they're now looking for this type of person. Let's provide some examples from a CV in that section as well. So on page 1, effectively in that first half a page, you've already said, this is me, this is what I can come in and deliver to your business. And then it then draws you into then obviously the experience section, your education, and then some other information at the back, such as if you've got a driving license, if you need one, or, you know, IT systems and things that you can use. But very much thinking about your CV layout of how it can sort of draw you through, but also not putting everything in it. You don't want it to turn into sort of War and Peace. I've seen them, I've looked at them before, where, you know, I've had CVs at 8 or 9 pages long. Realistically, who's going to read that? You know, sort of 2 to 3 pages is perfectly fine. But again, really thinking about what you've got in there, is that really important?
Okay, great. So we've talked about structure and format. So the personal profile, and I would agree, is the most important thing. It's the hook that gets the recruiter or the hiring manager to go, I want to read more. So that's the thing you really need to, that elevator pitch that you talked about, really need to nail. So what should be in that personal profile? Should it be, I am a marketing manager, a project manager, I am looking for my next step in this? Like, how can you make that personal profile, that elevator pitch, really talk to the potential hiring manager or recruiter? And what I see, just to add to that, is lots of very standard CVs that people sort of send to every job with the same elevator pitch, the same personal profile. And you said something about tailoring. And for me, that's really important, because depending on the job, should we change that personal profile? So you just want to sort of maybe dig a little bit deeper to help people to think about how and what they should write in that personal profile.
Yeah, no, definitely. So with the personal profile, it's very much, yes, obviously it's around who you are. So obviously that job title that you're applying for, but it's then thinking about those things that really make you stand out. So what is it from that job description that business is looking for from that person? Can you then weave that in based on your previous experience? So, you know, have you managed multiple projects before, for example, that are multi-million-pound ones? So again, putting some of that tangible figures within it as well. So which then helps with that size and scope of what you've had that responsibility, really helps to kind of put you into context with that recruiter in mind. So, you know, bringing you to life in that short sentence.
Okay, so personal profile, bringing you to life, and tailoring it. So they're the 2 takeaways for this. I think that's what we're saying, isn't it? So yeah. Making sure that it's not standard for every job you go for. And I know that can be a bit of a ball ache for people who are like applying for loads of jobs. But then my take on this is you shouldn't really be applying for loads of jobs. You should be applying for a few jobs really well with really strong applications. And I think, you know, when I see the same person go through the jobs board and just send their CV for 5 or 6 jobs, and none of them are that relevant, I sort of think you're throwing your CV at the wall and hoping something will stick.
See where it sticks.
Yeah, and that unfortunately isn't going to make for a good application. So I think my feedback on that bit is make sure that you're really applying for jobs that you want, that you think that you can do, and that your CV speaks to, rather than just sending out like blanket CVs, because that will have a real impact on whether or not a recruiter or hiring manager is going to go, oh, look, that looks really relevant for me, or they've really made, you know, you can really see when you're reading it. So even though tailoring can be a bit time consuming, I would say that's going to set you apart massively from, you know, just a sort of standard CV that you're sending for every job.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is by not tailoring and just doing that spray effect, what's going to happen is actually it's going to be more demoralizing for you, because actually your CV isn't going to land with a recruiter, because they're just going to look at it and go, I'm not even going to look at it. So actually you've spent all this time sending it out for nothing. So it's better actually using that time instead to really go, is that definitely the role for me? Do I meet most of the criteria in that job description? If I do, what is it really about that role that I can do? And put that into that personal profile to say, this is what I can come in and deliver for you.
So, Kathryn, let's just talk about something that I know is on the mind of lots of people who are applying for jobs, and I see it. So there are lots of people in the group who might be doing career pivots or who've had senior jobs and now applying for sort of more administrative jobs because they don't want to be, you know, in such a senior role and they want more flexibility, and they're applying for jobs that don't necessarily completely match their skill set, but they're still sending out their CV that says senior manager, head of HR, whatever the job that they've had, but the job that they're applying for doesn't quite match. What do you advise people to do with their CV in an instance where they're applying for jobs where it isn't really a natural fit, but they still think that they've got transferable skills?
First off, it's recognizing that within that personal profile. So putting something to explain. If it is that actually I'm taking that step back, you're explaining it within the personal profile. You explain it within, if you do a cover letter with it as well, explain what, you know, give some reason for it, because again, that then helps people with it. But then also looking maybe at using a skills-based layout instead with those examples where perhaps it is focused more on that, not as senior level responsibilities, and therefore actually what you could then bring to it, which then would potentially push down your experience a little bit, but actually is also then answering the questions of the recruiter up front. So it is very much about then choosing the right layout for where you need to go to.
Okay, so there's two things I want to talk about there because they're both really interesting. So one is the type of CV. So we've talked about the chronological and we've talked about the skills based. So let's start there. Do you want to just talk about the difference between and when you should use which for what?
Yeah, so the chronological is obviously your personal profile, your key expertise, key skills, and then your experience. And pretty much just as it's straight in. So your experience obviously ends up quite high up on your CV. With the skills based, it's actually then taking those skills and actually providing then examples within it, to actually really put that into context. I tend to do most of my CVs now more in that layout, because actually I've found that it then helps to put in context for recruiters, and actually it's been proved really successful with clients I work with, because it is putting into context of what they can do and things. So regardless of whether you are going for a complete career change or just actually you're just moving on to a new role.
Okay, so skills based is otherwise known as a functional CV. They're the same, aren't they? So skills based or functional CV. Yes. And I think that, you know, functional and skill based CVs are a little bit trickier to write. I've seen some of those coming in, and it's not always natural. So to read it and to get why you're applying for that particular job. So you've got to make sure that if you are going to do a skills-based CV or a functional CV, you're making it really clear what those skills are that are relevant and related to the job. Yeah. And then the other point that you made before, which I think is so important, and I don't see this enough, is in the personal profile. If you are thinking about doing a career pivot or the job isn't a natural fit when you read the CV, don't let the recruiter or the hiring manager guess why you're applying, because they're just going to look at it and think, well, you haven't got any of the right skills or expertise for this, and it will go straight into the no pile. Whereas if you write in your personal profile or in your cover letter, you know, allude to it, talk about it and state, I've done this, but I'm doing that. I'm now doing this, and be really clear and purposeful. Then at least, you know, the recruiter or the hiring manager is really clear that you haven't just sent a CV out that's not relevant or related to the job that you're applying for. And you've actually written in your personal profile, you'll see from my CV this, but this is what I'm doing and why. And then at least, you know, because otherwise it's going to go straight into the this isn't relevant pile. And I don't think that people do this enough. So if you are making a career pivot or making a change or applying for a job that's, you know, maybe less senior or different to what you've been doing, tell the recruiter or the hiring manager why. And you would agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, you know, having recruited in the past, I've seen lots of CV where you almost then have to try and work it out. And like when I recruited in the past, it wasn't at the same volume that is now coming through. And it's about, therefore, then making it as easy as possible for that recruiter when they pick it up going, oh, yes, actually, this is the reason why this person has applied, and make it really clear. So, definitely agree with what you said, Katie.
Okay, so let's talk about how to talk about skills and achievements. I think this is, again, an area that people struggle with. And what I tend to see a lot on CVs is bullet points for what you've done in a job. So you'll say marketing manager, organic, marketing manager, digital manager. You might put organic search, paid search, social media posts, and I'm responsible for this and I'm responsible for that. And it will be a list of bullets of all the things you've done. So on the one level, that will be, okay, I can see that you've done it, but what else can people do on their CV when they're talking about what they've done and what their experience is, that will really help to move them from, okay, I can see what you've done, to I can see how you're going to help my business?
There's two aspects to it. One is starting it with those active verbs as well. So making it feel and live and breathe it. And the second part is around putting figures in. So if you've got data that says you've done this, which led to this, which actually helped the business in this way, it puts it more into context. So a recruiter can then pick up your CV and go, actually, if I was to pick you up from here and put you into my fish pond, would you sink or swim? And what we want to be saying is you can absolutely swim because you've done it before, because here's the evidence. CVs in the past used to literally be that list of duties and it wasn't, it's only sort of 5 or 6 years ago it started to change, but now it's very much about putting it into context. So what have you actually delivered within that role? Can you put it around some of those figures? And sometimes it is difficult because of perhaps of the level of role that you've been in, but it's thinking about actually what have you actually contributed. So it could be around some of that process, if you were involved in changing a process, which actually led to saving time, that's started to make it more achievement focused, even if you haven't got the actual, the specific figures. You can word it in such a way that makes it sound more deliverable.
Yeah, so 100% agree with you. And I think that just seeing a list of roles and responsibilities is very one-dimensional. And now you would expect or need to see what impact that's had on the company that you're working for. What impact did your role have? What changes did that bring? What improvements did they see? So that a hiring manager can see when they're reading your CV that, you would have done that there. As you said, now you're in my fish pond, what are you going to do to help me? So it's that shift, isn't it? And not everyone, I think with things like sales jobs, sometimes it's easier to say, well, I increased revenue from X to Y. But actually what you're saying is it's not just about that. Even if you say, I put this process in place and it improved, time, it was a time saving, or even though it's a bit more generic, we can still see the impact that, you changing process has had. And you think, okay, and it just contextualizes the work you've done. So that's a really, really important piece. Okay, so
it's particularly important the more senior you go up in roles as well, because they want to know that you can think both operationally but also strategically and commercially. So it's starting to get used to it from fairly early on. Oh yes, I can remember I've done this, which also then helps with performance reviews when you are in roles where you're actually justifying what you've done. So it all links together.
Yeah. So the other thing is, we talk about sort of prioritizing the relevance and not just adding to your CV. And in the old days, when I was applying for jobs, I remember getting my CV out, and every time I had a new job, I just bolt on the end of my CV, the new job, with a bunch of the things that I did. And I never really wanted to go back to basics and scratch and rip it up and start it again. What's your advice to people who have just keep adding and adding, apart from it getting longer and longer? How are you going to get it down to 2 pages? Where should you focus the time on your CV in the space?
It definitely, for me, it's the history that you've had for the last 10 years really needs to be on it, but more the last few years be that priority of more detail, and then you gradually reduce it as you go along. Anything more than 10 years ago, I tend to just put a reference to, like an overall summary that says, I've worked in these companies and these roles, but you don't put any detail behind it because they can ask you at interview. But then what I then do, because of having that skill section, you can still weave in some of those examples if it was an experience you've done 10 years ago that actually is relevant to that new job. You can bring it through, but just obviously not have the detail on your CV, because otherwise it just gets longer and longer and longer.
Well, actually, in our community, and I think this is a really important point, in our community, we do have a lot of people who might have been doing the job 10 years ago. So, for example, my last employed job was over 10 years ago. So if I was to go back to my CV now, when I was at Microsoft and all the other corporates, they were all 10 years ago. And so it would be really hard for me to know now what to put on, because it would be, you know, what have you been doing for these 10 years versus, so how do you, for those who have had a career break or who haven't been working in jobs that are relevant, and actually the jobs that were relevant were a long time ago, what advice do you have for people for how to present that information on their CV?
It's thinking about that transferable skills. To say, like, if somebody's had a career break, you've still been doing things within that career break. So using those examples within your CV to demonstrate it, but also to say, you know, actually, if there are some golden nuggets from that corporate life 10 years ago that you feel that are relevant, you can still bring it in to say, you know, you were involved in this, you know, if it was, say, like managing projects, you can manage, you know, something, you know, yes, it might be 10 years ago, but you're never going to forget that experience. So it's then bringing that, you know, within that early part of your CV.
Okay, so let's talk about something else that I know is talked about. When people talk about CVs, they say, oh, beat the ATS, and, you know, and what does that mean? And I think only now I'm in recruitment, I actually know what beating the ATS means. So just to let people know, when people say your CV needs to beat the ATS, ATS stands for applicant tracking system. And some companies who hire get automation to read your CV. So computers and systems read it rather than human beings. That's not in every case. Sometimes human beings will read it and sometimes it will be automated. So Kathryn, talk to us about what format your CV should be in and what they mean by beating the ATS. What should people do or think about when writing their CV, so that if it is going to be run through a system, an automated system and an ATS, what do people need to think about when writing their CVs?
So when writing it, it's about simple is better. So, you know, I've seen lots of very beautiful templates available on things like Canva and Etsy, and, you know, you can go on into Word and stuff and find them, but they've all got boxes in them. They've got little graphics that you can use for your skills and things. And actually with those, whether it's read by a human being or read by a computer system scanning it, they don't they make it very difficult for the reader to understand what it actually means. So having a little 5 dot next to your skill, what does that actually mean to the reader? So it's about not having all these graphics and putting tables in and stuff, because it might prevent it from being scanned. You know, most businesses in the UK, as Katie says, you know, don't have the applicant tracking systems, just pushes people through the process, but it still needs to be able to pull things like your contact phone number on and your email address off it. So you need to make it easy for that to read in your name. But then it will be a human being that then reads your CV afterwards. So it is about creating that layout that allows the content to shine rather than what it looks like.
So that's, again, another really interesting point that you brought up, and one I wanted to talk to you about, which is these fancy CV templates that I see all the time, not just from an ATS point of view, but just from a template point of view. What do you think it's better to have, just a white A4 sheet of Word document that's Word only? Would you advise that if you're in a more yes, so would I.
Yes.
So I do see these lovely looking ones with all the boxes.
They're all pretty, but for me, having recruited in the past and as well writing CVs now, I look at it going, what are you trying to hide? Because they are very pretty, but it sometimes almost makes it very difficult to read. So when you've got like multiple columns, and because your natural eye line read goes across the page, it doesn't read it in columns. So therefore, actually, it's about making it as easy as possible. Thinking, if I was to pick up, the way I kind of say to clients is, if you were to pick up your CV, can you read it properly? If you can't and it's difficult to do, then stick to simple. Simple is best.
So I agree. I get a lot of CVs every day and I look at them, and the ones with all the different boxes and skills, and I'm jumping all over the place and I'm not sure quite where to look, and it's not telling me the story. Whereas a very well written, straightforward CV, which is in kind of the order that I would expect. And I know that, you know, times have moved on, and I want to just talk about what a modern CV should look like, because we're basically saying, you know, all of these modern technologies and templates, don't bother, like stick to the good old fashioned Word doc. Is that right? Or do you think that times have changed and that hiring managers and recruiters are expecting something more from a CV, or should it just be a traditional CV template? How have things changed in the CV world?
I think for, you know, most sort of the CV writers I talk to, as well as recruiting managers, they'll say, I just want it as easy as possible for me. When I'm doing that initial sift, if I've got 100 CVs in front of me, for example, and I'm having to hunt for the information, I'm going to get annoyed. And it's about how can we make it as easy as possible for that reader to go, yes, absolutely, I can see what you can come in and deliver. You've already answered everything because you've tailored it to my job description. I absolutely want to meet with you and put you straight onto the yes pile. And that's the objective, is you want to go onto the yes pile for interview.
Yeah. Okay. And then another question, I suppose, is the format in terms of PDF versus Word documents. So people often say, should I send it as a PDF or a Word document? What would you suggest?
I normally say submit it as a Word document, personal preference, but it's about following the instructions on the advert when you're submitting it onto the portal or wherever you're applying through. You know, if it says they want it in a PDF, then submit it as a PDF. If they want it as a Word, then they'll have it as a Word. Sometimes the reason they ask for a Word document is in case HR then does the anonymizing of the CV first before they send it on. So obviously, if you've put it in a PDF, they won't be able to do that. So it's about making it, you know, but it's just about following what the instructions are. But I normally say submitting the Word document.
I mean, I think rarely do companies say, you know, they'll say submit a CV, but they probably wouldn't say in a PDF or a Word. But I think I agree with you. If it comes in as a PDF, I can't anonymize it. I can't do anything with it. And actually, sometimes recruiters will help you if they're working on your behalf, and they'll say, oh, well, you know, I'll just tweak this, or we can change the format a bit, and it just saves time from going back and forth. So whereas if it's a PDF, it's a fixed document, you can't do anything, it just has to be sent. So it's not as manipulative, not as malleable as a Word doc. Okay, so we've been running, I can't believe how quickly time's gone, but we've been running for almost half an hour now. So I'm gonna let's just end, not a negative, but a positive negative, which are, we both look at CVs a lot. What are the absolute no-nos? What are the common mistakes, Kathryn, that you and I, let's talk both of us, are seeing on CVs that kind of not immediately put it in the no pile, but you're a bit like, you see it and you're like, no. What are some of yours? And I'll share some of mine.
Using the common buzzwords. So championed, spearheaded, very AI driven. I've seen those far too many times. I'm like, yeah, what do they actually mean? Avoiding typos. Yes, guru, yes.
No jargon.
Yes, so avoiding typos. So if you put one of your skills is attention to detail, and then your CV is full of typos, use things like, you know, you can attach Grammarly if you really stuck on it. So I have Grammarly on mine, so when I'm writing CVs, I just check it, because sometimes you do sit there going, even with an English spell check on Word, you're like, is that really right? So it's good to be able to check it. Don't overfill it with jargon. So, you know, yes, in your industry, there might be loads of jargon with stuff, but actually, what does that then mean to that recruiting manager? And it might be a HR person that reads it first. And if actually it's just completely full of jargon, they may not necessarily understand it. So it's about, you know, reducing it, or at least putting it what the full version is, because it might be different between different roles, but it's the same, like letters.
Yeah. Okay, so they're all ones I would agree with. What would I add to that? I don't like it when it's all in different fonts and sizes and in and out of italics and bolds and all sorts of funny, whizzy all of that jars me. So it needs to look clean and easy to read in a size sort of 11 font, I would say, and not too small and all packed on with no margins.
Yeah, you don't want a magnifying glass to have to read it.
Make it easy to read and not all like where you've made the margin so wide and the font so small that you can get it to 2 pages. I'd almost rather it runs to 3 that I can read it and it breathes, let it breathe. Another no-no I would say is calling it your curriculum vitae or a CV. I'd say make sure your name is at the top and don't call it a CV. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's in the past you would have written CV at the top, but actually it's better to put the job title of the role you're applying for at the top. Use that space.
But I think my number and typos just it's just not acceptable in a CV. If it's your document, you're marketing yourself, you have to get someone else to read it and just check it for you. So always get someone else to check your CV. And I think my number one is really just CVs that aren't tailored at all, that just come in and you can see that kind of no effort's gone into mirroring the job description or the job in any way, and you're left to work out why they've applied for it or what possible skills they might have. That's kind of an automatic no for me. So when I see that a CV is tailored and I've got the hook at the beginning, it really draws me in. I think writing a CV is a skill, and people don't necessarily want to invest in CV writers. We do have a CV service and Kathryn writes for us. But it is an investment. It's an investment in a document that you're going to use to help you get a job. And if you feel like you need help, we're here to help you. Hopefully today's session has given you a lot of pointers to go back, and relook at your CV and tidy it up and make some of these changes. But we are also here if you need us. You can happy to help, and if you want to drop in any comments or questions, there's a CV template actually on the Flexible Working People website that people can download. I'm going to just double check. I haven't got a skills based one, I have got the chronological one. And if you do want any help, we are here, and we'll drop a link into the CV service. So if you do want Kathryn or one of the team to help you to write your CV, the process is that you have a briefing with our CV writer, with Kathryn, and you send, if you've got an existing CV, you would send it and then talk about the types of jobs that you would want. Tell us, Kathryn, what the process is for if someone wanted to work with you on their CV. Talk to us about the process that you would take them through.
Yes, obviously I get the referral from Katie, then arrange to meet with the individual. So I do a discovery call with every client where we go through to find out absolutely exactly, what they want. Then after the call, send over a couple of questionnaires to fill out, just to kind of get a little bit of additional information, which really helps with the CV. Gets you thinking about those achievements as well. So actually it's doing some of that pre-prep work ready for interview as well. So it's starting getting you thinking about, if I was to be asked this question, what would my example be? And then once I've got those back, normally within 10 days or 10 working days, you get your brand new CV sent over to you in draft form, and then I meet with you again to kind of go through it, make sure you're completely happy with the content of it, and then off you go and start applying for roles.
Yeah, I think more than that, I would say, more than just having a CV and a document, the whole process of going through with Kathryn or a CV writer means that you are thinking about all of those things that you can then go on and talk about in the interview. So going through that process, going through that thinking about where you've added value and what are the key achievements, like all of that is such great work to do, because it will help you for any job or any job interview that then you go on to have, because ultimately that document is going to get you the foot in the door, and then you've got to go in and bring it all to life. So, it's such a powerful tool, isn't it? And having those sessions with Kathryn.
What we're doing with this by sort of coming and working with us is it's not just about now, it's about the future. So actually you're learning skills. So I'm passing on my experience to you, and then you can then carry on using it. You might want to come back in the future, but if not, you've got the skills to be able to go and do it in the future, so you understand what's required and stuff to kind of really help position you, and through some coaching as well.
Exactly. Okay, so if you do want our help, then I'm going to drop the link in below. We also help with cover letters and LinkedIn profiles and CV. So there is help there for you if you need it. And we've also got a special rate if you are a career returner. So if you've been out of work for more than a year and you're returning to work and you need a CV, then there's a special rate for returners. So do reach out, do get in touch. We'd love to help you. And I hope that you found that session really useful. Thanks so much, Kathryn, for your time tonight.
Not a problem. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, all right. So thanks so much, everyone. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.